It was a stormy afternoon in Washington, D.C., the kind where the air hangs heavy with tension, where even the Capitol dome seems to crackle under the weight of the sky. Thunder rolled low across the marble columns, and the rain tapped angrily against the courthouse windows like impatient fingers demanding justice. Inside the grand federal courtroom, fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow over a room already pulsing with unspoken resentment and barely veiled political warfare. At the bench sat Judge Amy Coney Barrett, her expression unreadable, carved in the stoic poise she'd perfected long before she ever wore the black robe. Her eyes, a precise blend of calculation and conviction, moved deliberately over the courtroom. Her voice, usually calm and clinical, cut through the air, sharp and sudden. "Ms. Crockett, I will not ask again. Stay within the confines of the law and this courtroom's decorum, or you'll be held in contempt." The words hit like a slap, but Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She stood at the defense table, elegant and unshaken, her tailored suit soaked at the hem from the storm, though she wore it like armor. Her eyes, dark and alive with fire, didn't leave Barrett's, and though the room waited, some in delight, others in dread, for her to retaliate, Jasmine simply smiled. A quiet, deliberate smile. "No, Your Honor," she said, voice smooth as silk over steel. "I'm right where I belong." Jasmine Crockett had come a long way from the cracked sidewalks of Dallas' South Side. Born to a single mother who juggled 3 jobs and a prayer life stronger than steel cables, Jasmine had learned early that justice wasn't handed down. It was fought for, clawed out of dirt, and often denied to people who looked like her. Her dream was never just to be in the courtroom, it was to change it. To force truth to sit at the same table as power and not blink first. Judge Barrett, on the other hand, had built her life with an almost opposite blueprint. Raised in a tightly knit Catholic community in Louisiana, educated at the best private schools, and steeped in originalist legal theory, she had carved her path not through rebellion, but through reverence for structure and order. To her, the Constitution wasn't just a document, it was scripture. And in her courtroom, deviation from it, real or perceived, was not tolerated. This wasn't supposed to be a national headline. It had begun as a routine civil rights case, an alleged abuse of power by a state agency in the wrongful incarceration of a teenage black boy. But when Jasmine took on the case, something changed. She came armed with not just legal arguments, but searing truth, history, and the voices of those unheard. Her tactics were bold, unapologetic, and emotionally charged. Barrett saw it as a threat to the sanctity of the legal process. Jasmine saw the process as already broken. The tension had been simmering for weeks, each day in court peeling back layers of judicial decorum and exposing something raw underneath. Barrett's clipped interjections grew more frequent, Jasmine's rebuttals more pointed. The trial had become a theater of race, ideology, power, and pain. And then came the moment. Jasmine was cross, examining the lead witness, a police captain who had signed off on the teen's arrest without evidence. She laid out the timeline, the contradictions, the racial bias in a stack of similar cases. The courtroom was dead silent except for her voice, measured, yet trembling with fury barely held back. She held up a photo of the boy, shackled in juvenile detention, his eyes swollen from tears. "This is not an exception, Captain," she said, her voice quivering. "This is your norm, and that should terrify every single person in this room." Barrett slammed her gavel. "Ms. Crockett, enough. This is a courtroom, not a pulpit." Jasmine turned slowly to face the judge. Her fingers curled against the edge of the table. She looked tired, Bone, deep tired, but her voice didn't waver. Maybe if the pulpit had been heard, Your Honor, we wouldn't need to be here. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scrambled for their notepads. Barrett's lips parted, stunned, for the first time, visibly rattled. And that's when Jasmine did the unthinkable. She reached into her case file and pulled out sealed documents, records from a whistleblower, an anonymous informant within the police department, documents that not only confirmed a systemic pattern of racial profiling, but also exposed falsified reports. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Barrett's face hardened. "How did you obtain those?" she demanded. "They were sent to my office this morning," Jasmine replied, "by someone who still believes truth matters more than chain of command." The prosecution objected wildly. The bailiff stepped forward. Barrett rose, her face flushed with fury. "This is an egregious violation." "No," Jasmine interrupted, for the first time raising her voice. "What's egregious is a system that silences truth in favor of order. If I'm held in contempt for exposing this, then so be it. But I will not be complicit in the lie." The courtroom was stunned into stillness. It wasn't just about legal ethics anymore. It wasn't even just about that boy. It was about all the boys, all the daughters, all the families gaslit by a system that demanded calm while it buried injustice. And in that moment, the divide between judge and lawyer became a mirror. Each saw in the other what they most feared, conviction unmoored from their own beliefs. But something shifted in Barrett. She sat back down, took a breath. Her hands were tight on the bench, but her eyes had lost some of their fire. She studied Jasmine, not as a rogue attorney, not as a political adversary, but as a woman risking everything for something she truly believed in. Barrett ordered a recess. For 15 minutes the courtroom emptied, reporters buzzing like hornets in the hallway. Jasmine sat alone at her table, staring at the bench, her hands trembling for the first time. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't care. The truth was out. When they returned, Barrett's ruling stunned everyone. Though the court does not condone the manner in which the evidence was presented. She began, voice steady. It also cannot ignore the legitimacy of its content. This case is no longer about procedure, it is about people. She paused, glancing at Jasmine. The motion to suppress is denied. The documents will remain part of the record. There was no applause. Just a heavy silence, full of awe. The trial continued for another week, but everything had changed. Barrett and Jasmine spoke less like opponents and more like reluctant allies. Both women began seeing the full scope of what was at stake, not just for the defendant, but for the nation watching them. One subplot emerged through a quiet figure in the gallery, Jasmine's younger brother, Marcus, a public school teacher. He'd driven all night to watch her in court. Their childhood had been marked by poverty, but he'd always admired her fire, and yet he feared it would consume her. Over late, night takeout in her hotel room, he reminded her gently that justice didn't just need warriors, it needed healers. His words would stay with her. Another subplot wound its way through Barrett's chambers. A conversation with her daughter, a pre-law student who had watched the footage of the trial and asked earnestly, "Mom, why do people hate her?" That question stayed in Barrett's thoughts through sleepless nights and long walks home. The verdict came on a bright Friday morning, the sun cutting through days of rain. The boy was exonerated. The state agency was ordered to undergo a full investigation. Jasmine walked out of the courtroom exhausted, tears streaking her face. Reporters surged toward her. She stopped, lifted her chin, and simply said, "We're not done yet." Judge Barrett watched from her window above, unseen, and whispered the same words. The case had been just one trial, but it became a watershed. It forced a nation to ask itself whether truth and law had to be enemies, whether dignity could exist in both revolution and restraint. Months later, Jasmine and Barrett would meet again, this time not in court, but on a panel about justice reform. The audience expected fireworks. Instead, they witnessed two women, shaped by fire and faith, willing to listen, if not yet agree. The lesson was clear. Justice doesn't live in one ideology or courtroom. It lives in the hands of those brave enough to confront the system and themselves. And sometimes the greatest change begins with conflict that forces us to feel, to see, to remember what we're fighting for. Even in a storm, especially in a storm.